review AEW World's End, and there's a couple of things that I want to say before I actually start my review. Is that overall I felt the show was kind of like an A minus, just because really the point of the whole show was what was AEW going to do for next year, and really just what they're really trying to set up. And I think the other thing that I will say is that the match quality was really good. But it's definitely just classic AEW, where some matches are long and some matches may not. It's just like one of those things too. Like, we know their style of matches. Usually a lot of flips. It goes on a little longer than it needs to be, and sometimes there is some really compelling storyline. But I think the entertainment factor was good, and then also too, I think that how they featured people for the most part was really positive. There's definitely some negatives, and I think also too that for the end result for the devil to be revealed, that was important for them just to not continue it on very longer. I also feel that one thing I'm very proud of is that they had 12 matches, but 3 pre-show matches. So they're starting to get in a momentum of not having a show with like 16 matches, 17 matches. That's ridiculous. And then the other thing that I will say is that I also really like that they had the monitors on this time. Like, they have a lot of like shows where they don't have monitors on, and definitely this is your last pay-per-view of the year. People have been complaining about that, and WWE like does that a lot with their shows. So definitely you really need to just show that type of professionalism, make the fan experience worth it. Why would I want to get a certain seat if I can't see what's going on, really? You have to. Presentation is very important. So when I got into the arena, and then the other thing that I will say was that the only bad thing, this is not really AEW's fault, was the arena, because like there were like massive lines of people. So a lot of people were just kind of struggling to get into the building. So it honestly felt like maybe there was like 30 or 40 bread lines, really. It was really hard, but it was really just one of those things too where people had to get out of certain lines to go into the shorter lines. But it's not AEW's fault, but like how they managed some of the lines in Nassau Coliseum is the fault of the place. The other thing that I'll say before I start is that I didn't have an issue with Ticketmaster this time, that I was able to get the seats that I wanted. I paid $150, and I got a really good seat for like $300. So I probably would have shaken hands with Sting, but he's a cool guy, but he's not worth paying an extra $300 for. I'm like that with most people, but I digress. So when I first came in, there was Willow Nightingale versus Chris Statlander. I'm kind of like happy that they have both women on the card. Really, there's really nothing like special about their match. They just had a regular match. And I'm happy Willow Nightingale won, because Chris Statlander has hold the TBS title, so we need to kind of get to a point with Chris Statlander where really that beating her is a big deal, because she's been like a champion before. So definitely Willow Nightingale has to actually go after the women's champion, or ROH, or on TBS championship. But I do think there has to be also Athena having matches on the card. People are talking big about her, push her, but it's just a regular Willow Nightingale match where she was kind of like the powerhouse and like lifting Chris Statlander. The next match was on the 20 Battle Royale, and I was really happy that this match didn't go on for that long. It was like 15 minutes. And I'm also happy that they all came down to the ring at one time, because I think that it kind of speeds it up, really. Like, it didn't feel like a time waster or whatever, really. So I was kind of happy. There were some issues with this. Like, obviously, Dalton Castle, a lot of people really like his entrance and a lot of great things and believe that he's a great future. But I do think that I go with a lot of people that they really bury Dalton Castle a lot. Like, he's ultimately like the Butters of AEW. Like, he's really just, poor Dalton Castle, really. So I do think that him getting eliminated very quickly is actually bad, and it shows that he's really just a jobber. But they need to kind of do more with Dalton Castle. They had Trent Beretta at the end, and I kind of would say too that he eliminated Danhausen, really. So maybe they're trying to set up to a best friends breakup, but I don't think that would actually go over with people. I just think that, or if you want to do something like Danhausen versus Orange Cassidy, that would be like kind of like a funny joke match. If it's leading to that, okay, really. But I do think that Trent Beretta, as I said, who the hell is he? Like he's definitely part of the Best Friends, but he's really done nothing significant. He doesn't. He's almost like the best example is Imperium. Like the two people in Imperium don't stand out. Gunter stands out. So same thing with the Best Friends. They don't stand out, but Orange Cassidy stands out. So I think that maybe they shouldn't have had him at the last one. They probably should have had somebody a little bit more significant, like Dalton Castle. Be the second place person. Then Killswitch eliminates it. Obviously, you knew Killswitch was going to win Luchasaurus, and I also think that that's actually a good featuring of him. And definitely in the match, they kind of did that like thing too, where they had like a Luchasaurus be attacked a bunch of times. By the way, Luchasaurus, Killswitch, they're the same person. But they had Luchasaurus be attacked by chairs and being down on the ground for a while. And then they kind of did that thing too where maybe towards the end he gets in the ring and then he kind of eliminates people. So I do think that there's two things about it. Like it does make it a little predictable to have him kind of do the Kane thing where he comes in and he eliminates everybody. And maybe that would kind of be good. I think that would actually would have been better because what happens later on in the show is that he gives his TNT Championship opportunity to Christian Cage. So I think that it would have been better if you saw him like do all this work and come off like a badass and then actually give it to Christian Cage because like you did all of this to get that result really. Whereas in this match they didn't do that. They kind of had him be on the ground and when he was supposed to eliminate, he's supposed to eliminate. So they could have done their choreography better to tell that story of okay, well Luchasaurus is like doing all this work and then Christian Cage is just telling him just to eat crow and all that. The other thing is that there was Hook versus Wheeler Yuta. So I didn't expect Wheeler Yuta to win at all, but I do think that I'm happy to see some more hardcore stuff from him because, like I've said about Wheeler Yuta, that he's kind of been like the Butters of. He's also like somebody that I call the Butters because definitely he kind of in the Blackpool Combat Club he loses a lot, and I think that he's also like kind of like Dalton Castle, like he's just there to job really. So I do think that I want to see more from Wheeler Yuta. Like definitely they can do a Wheeler Yuta versus Bryan Danielson feud. Like that would I think a lot of people would really want to see that really. So I do think that it's not going to have him lose a lot. And I also think like for Hook, like I've said, like Hook versus RVD, they need to kind of get to that at a certain point really. But I do like what. Yuta was a good heel. Like he was like assaulting Hook in front of his dad. Really, they did some good hardcore spots. And definitely too. Like I think because obviously they had the match between Edge and Christian that was no disqualification. They did enough, but they didn't do too much. And I think that's kind of been the thing about AEW is that they kind of just know. I think sometimes they do their matches in a way that could be more effective. Or sometimes it's either under effective or over effective. And I think that this was kind of like perfectly effective because you have some hardcore stuff, but you didn't do it to a point where when you had Edge and Christian, you're like, okay, I've seen so many hardcore and crazy shit stuff, So I do think that they did enough with this match, and I'm okay with, and I'm kind of okay with like the end result, really. So when it comes to the main card, you have the Blackpool Combat Club, Claudio Castagnoli, Bryan Danielson, Mark Briscoe, Daniel Garcia versus Brody King, Jay White, Jay Lethal, and Roosh. And what I would kind of say about this is that definitely, I had like a couple of things that I would talk about with this match. Like I kind of wish that they actually had Swerve, and then they also had Andrade in it. Like even though they're doing double duty, I would have them do double duty because I think that would kind of be a little bit better just to kind of celebrate everybody who was participating really. And almost like the reward is Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston don't actually have a match, don't have two matches. They actually get one match for being in the finals. The other thing that I want to say about this is I really appreciate what they did with Brody King and like Roosh. Like they kind of gave them like new intros. And as I said, that I think they need to treat this like the Money in the Bank, really. And what I mean by that is that that with years in WWE, usually when they do Money in the Bank, like in the 2000s, like I remember like watching WWE from 2006 to 2000, like, 2008 or 9, because I remember like watching the Money in the Bank in college. I remember watching Money in the Bank and WrestleMania, and usually during like the WrestleMania Money in the Bank is that what a lot of the like usually the wrestlers that are featured, usually they have really really big years and stuff like that. Like for example, like Mr. Kennedy before he messed it up for himself, or Jeff Hardy or other people. Like I think that you also have to kind of do this effect with the with like the people in the Continental Classic, where you're almost like, okay, well, we have the Continental Classic, now we're having World's End, and because we're having World's End, we want to just take all these wrestlers, these 8 wrestlers, and they're actually going to have no, actually all 12 wrestlers, but the 8 wrestlers in this match, we're going to take all these guys, and they're going to have a really great year, and they're going to be really great single stars. So it kind of tells everybody, okay, there's a reward for making it to that point. And I would kind of say that, the only thing that bothered me about this match is that Jay Lethal got the pin, and he really didn't get that much offense. And I kind of think that, again, like he's kind of in that jobber role. So I really think they need to do something very strong with him. Like I think he should at least feud with Orange Cassidy right now, or even like Eddie Kingston. But they really need to kind of book him strong. And as I said, like, there are some wrestlers that are in that traditional Butters role, like the charismatic person, but somebody who's actually should be higher in the card, but we see them kind of lose a lot. So I think Jay Lethal, he kind of was really underutilized. There was nothing that really stood out to me in this match. It was just a regular type of, just 8-man tag team match. But I think what happened was that there's a lot of different people in this, and they all kind of worked hard on having a good match. Nothing really stood out to me, but it didn't feel like they were doing a lot of flips or hardcore spots or whatever, really. They were just having a regular match. And I also kind of remember, like, again, I'm really a big fan of Brody King. Like, I really think that he needs a singles run, or you take the House of Black and they kind of got their singles titles. They really need to start doing that. And especially with Brody King, because he's a big, beefy boy, really. So you really have to feature that. The other thing that I'll say is that like that spot with Claudio Castagnoli grabbing Brody King and just and doing the Cesaro swing, the big swing, that was really impressive, and that was a really good visual. I almost broke my camera because my camera just had an issue, and I was like, man, I wanted to take some pictures of that because that was really freaking impressive. And I also think that, another interesting thing was Daniel Garcia got the pin. But again, I do think that, like, as I said, I don't really see anything in Daniel Garcia. He does that really stupid dance. But I do hope that, like, honestly, I can't always have who I want. I can't have everything that I want, really. And I understand that. So if people believe in Daniel Garcia, go right ahead, really. But I also appreciate him getting the pinfall, because usually in most matches, you'd probably see somebody like Bryan Danielson getting the pinfall, but I'm happy that they gave it to somebody else, Bryan Danielson or Jay White, really. And I also am happy that they kind of did some teasing between Jay White and Bryan Danielson. So, like, it's also just that thing, too, just trying to warm up other matches on the card, like warm up future matches, like Bryan Danielson versus Jay White. Definitely Claudio Castagnoli versus Brody King. I think a lot of people would love to see that. The next match on the card was Miro versus Andrade. And again, there was really like nothing too special about this match. It was kind of interesting to see his wife, CJ Perry, actually turn on Andrade at the very, very end. And I also felt it was a little weird because, like, when the crowd was watching this match, they were more on the side of Miro, but it was kind of really booked for the way they kind of been doing the stories. They kind of made Miro the jerk, and they made Miro the heel, and they made Andrade the babyface. But when everybody saw the match, they were kind of more mad at Andrade. But like, there's a story that Andrade wants to leave to WWE, really. So that's kind of almost why that happened, really. But I do think that, honestly, as some people are saying, that Miro has to get out of these, well, my wife is having affairs type of thing, because they kind of overdo that with him. So you have to kind of like do something a little different. And maybe he could be like Powerhouse Hobbs, where he's trying to go after bigger and better. And if he's also the Redeemer, maybe he needs to redeem his career, and he needs to. He needs to kind of do that really, because there's a lot of just when you work with Miro, that's kind of been like a very stereotypical story for him. He's a little too much of that wrestler that he does the same storyline where people are cheating on his wife, or his wife is being promiscuous. So they have to kind of get him out of that. The next match was really surprising. It was Timeless Tony Storm versus Riho, and I think that this was a really great match. And there's a couple of things that I really want to say with this as well, that a lot of people really underestimate Riho, but she does do a great job in the ring, and I really think that, as I said in like a prior video, that she kind of needs to be like an underdog, and she needs some new booking. Like, she can definitely talk about like how there is fat shaming in this society, and people also shame people like who change their gender and then identify as women for competing in sports. But then she can also be like, I'm really skinny. There's people who think that I look like a little girl, or I can't do anything. So I think that she kind of had that as a storyline that would kind of be a little bit stronger, to be like, okay, I'm doing it for people. I'm saying that all body shapes, even like the really thin ones, can be it. And then also you can even talk about some criticisms against her. Like, also people say that she's Japanese, and like people shouldn't be. There's some people who say that she can't win because she speaks Japanese. So it's almost like, why would I want a champion of my company that doesn't know the Queen's English, or like how she's underestimated. There's a lot that she can kind of do, but I also think that it comes from bad booking with her. Like, obviously she should have not been the first women's champion, or she should not even have been a contender. It should have been Nyla Rose versus maybe Britt Baker or Toni Storm, but Nyla Rose should have been the first women's champion, not Riho. So definitely this is kind of like the fault of bad booking, but that she's not as over as she should be, or she's not as presented as well, really. But they can definitely do some redeeming with Riho's character. But I do think that Timeless Toni Storm, she is one of the best women's wrestlers. She is probably the most famous woman. She's probably the best women's wrestler on this card. If they had Britt Baker as the Devil or part of that faction, I think then actually that would have been. She would have been the top woman. But I do think that right now it's Timeless Toni Storm. She kind of has the Marilyn Monroe thing. She kind of acts like a big deal. She kind of is really, really arrogant and very prissy. So I like how she can combine wrestling and her character so well, and it doesn't feel kind of like hokey. And then the other thing too is that sometimes you look at somebody like Jay Lethal when he was impersonating Ric Flair, like and Macho Man. Like, obviously Jay Lethal does comedy well, so obviously him doing that works well. But what I like about Timeless Toni Storm is that you can take her. It's a joke, but we don't get lost in the joke. We get lost in her performance, but she does it very well. And I really like her Marilyn Monroe look. That works very, very well, and I want her to keep doing that. And then also, too, like, I like her outfit as well, really, because she does look like she's wearing a big swimsuit. And that's kind of what women wore in the 1940s, but she can still fight in whatever, really. And then also was a cool visual. Like, Riho was wearing a lot of white. She was wearing a lot of black. So it works well. And I also kind of appreciate what when Luther kind of did that thing too, where like she was on his shoulders, and then he did like a clothesline or whatever, and it was really funny because I thought everyone was saying that was pointless, but people were saying no, that was timeless. So Toni Storm does a lot of great getting reactions out of the audience. So I really think that she kind of needs to kind of get to a point where maybe she has the red carpet treatment and doing other things, like make her just go a little bit further. You have Oscar season, so I think that you have to kind of get like the like in movie theaters, they have those things where they kind of have like all the ropes and everything and glitter and glamour, and you kind of like need to make her a big deal or have her have a director's chair or whatever, really. And then you have to kind of make her find an opponent that's really like a huge underdog to really take her down. Like somebody who thinks they are, like their farts don't stink. That's Toni Storm, and find the right opponent for her. And I really don't think you have anybody except for, and I hate you saying her name again, is is Athena, because if you want to make her a big deal, and people are talking about her being a big deal, she should kind of be involved, and she can tell a good story with Tony Storm. I think that then you go down that direction. I would love to see Tony Storm versus Nyla Rose, like, because that would kind of be interesting. Like, Nyla Rose is kind of like the native beast, the Godzilla versus, the Marilyn Monroe. I think that'd be a really interesting, dynamic, I think, because Nyla Rose has a lot of potential. So I do think that, that would be a really interesting feud. But I do think what they did with Rio was good. Rio as an underdog wrestler, if they really kind of sold her as that, really, I think that actually she would be a little bit further along with her charisma. The next match was Swerve Strickland versus Dustin Rhodes. And unfortunately and very sadly, this was kind of like the worst match on the card. There's a couple of things that I do want to say that obviously I can be understanding that obviously they did not know what to do because Keith Lee wasn't there. And then also, too, if Keith Lee gets injured too much, you need to kind of retire him and maybe make him an announcer or whatever. You can't just kind of have him blowing off matches because he's injured. And I don't mean to be an asshole, but you just can't have people that get injured very, very quickly and blow the big one. Because I think this is like the second time it happened, really. So definitely he needs to either retire or he needs to be a coach or he needs to be like an announcer or whatever. But this can't be happening too much. And then the next thing that I kind of would say is that he said he was dealing with an injury since 2022. So honestly, that's very significant if you've been dealing with an injury for over like a year or something like that. So he really needs to kind of prove that he can go or he needs to retire. And I don't mean to be an asshole, and I know that sounds very mean, but you can't just be blowing off matches, because that would have been a good match. But they had Dustin Rhodes, so I appreciate Dustin Rhodes coming out for two reasons. That obviously, he's getting older. He should kind of say goodbye to the audience. And then also, too, that obviously with Jim Crockett Promotions and Dustin Rhodes and Sting retiring and Ric Flair also being in Jim Crockett Promotions and other things like that, you really should have Dustin involved on that card. So just to see him is good. But I do appreciate him coming up to the plate and having a match with Swerve. So they were trying to put something together, but the execution was terrible. The big thing is that with Swerve Strickland, we expect a lot more from him. And I think that, again, this kind of comes from like AEW doing too much or not telling the right story. Or sometimes when you have like a match, what they should do is write like a paragraph and say this is how we want to do the match. Now let's write another execution. That's another paragraph, and then another paragraph. What I'm trying to say is that they should write like multiple multiple paragraphs on how they want to do a match, and then they should kind of like talk about, okay, we have like 6 ideas, so let's just eliminate the ones that don't really work. And I think that's what they should have done with this, because I think that maybe backstage they kind of said something like, okay, we want Swerve Strickland to we want to like at least have some offense with Dustin Rhodes, just to make sure he actually is doing something on the card and he actually means something. And he's also had matches where he's endured a lot, really. But I think what they should have done is when they did like Swerve Strickland breaking his ankle with a cinder block, that should have been it. Because it does two things. It makes Swerve Strickland look ruthless. It also shows that his offense is actually very dangerous. And then the other thing that it does is it sets up a situation where it shows that AEW can have squash matches. But that should have been it. And even if you had Swerve lose for a disqualification or whatever, that's how they should have done it. But I did think their match went on way too long, even though it was like 9 minutes. But I did think that it's one of those things that a lot of people were saying was that they should have just wrapped it up really, really quickly, not just make it a little too long. It should have been, that should have been it, really. And it also shows like how more of a threat Swerve Strickland is. But they kind of did something where they're like, oh no, he did a double foot stomp onto a cinder block and it hurt Dustin Rhodes' ankle. So we're gonna do something where Dustin Rhodes like a video game character, goes on for a little bit longer. But I didn't think that was necessary. I think they should have just have Swerve Strickland do that and move on to the next thing. The next thing was Le Sex Gods and Darby Allin and Sting versus Ricky Starks, Big Bill, and the Don Callis family. So there was a couple of things that I want to say about this. That I was really surprised because Sammy Guevara scored the pinfall on Ricky Starks, but I don't mind that happening because usually as I said, I'll say the expression again that Powerhouse Hobbs is like Butters, from South Park, where he's there, people like him, and then poor Hobbs, he always loses our jobs really. So I do think that I'm happy that that he didn't get the pinfall, but usually in classic AEW booking, they always have like Hobbs kind of get the pinfall in this. It was good to have a match with Sting. I really appreciate Sting at the end match, like high-fiving people. Like usually he walks off and goes back, but he needs to kind of get into that pattern of just like saying goodbye to the fans like that. So I like that he did that. I also kind of think that, in substitute for Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho versus Big Bill and Ricky Starks, and they definitely did a really great job with this. So I mean, this was a good substitute. I think the only thing that was bad was that they're going to have Kyle Fletcher, and then I was like, who the fuck is Kyle Fletcher? They switched him out for Takeshita, but for example, if you were going to do a match with if you're going to do like the Blackpool Combat Club for the trios title, what you would do is that you would have Moxley, Bryan Danielson, and Claudio Castagnoli. You wouldn't do something like you wouldn't have like Kyle Wheeler in that mix and then say, okay, we're actually going to swap him out really because he's not as established as those other people. So I felt that was kind of stupid that they had Kyle Fletcher in there and then they switched him out really. And definitely too, like I think like everybody did their roles. Like once again, there was nothing really special. I really appreciate Takeshita getting a lot of offense, and really I think in the group that for them to have Sammy Guevara pin Ricky Starks, I think that was good because obviously you want to reestablish Sammy Guevara, and then also too when you see Takeshita get a lot of offense, that's actually really good as well because he's a really good wrestler. He does have a lot of charisma, so you need to kind of show off to people that don't have the same shine or whatever. He's definitely a formidable threat, really, and I would definitely love to see him. I'm definitely in the Continental Classic next year. Like he really should be in it, and other tournaments. He really should be like in every tournament and showing what he can do, really. So I do think that that's kind of good. I do think that also, too, the Don Callis family, it is getting a little redundant. It's people talking shit about what's his name, Don Callis. So it does get a little like, okay, same old shit, really. We need to kind of like, move on a little bit, or they have to kind of do something different. They need to kind of go after something, or maybe they're like minions of the devil or whatever, but it does kind of feel like, okay, Don Callis is doing this thing, that thing, and that's kind of the problem with AEW. I think that is, they have a lot of, they have like flanderization, or they have the same types of characters, and usually when the characters kind of transcend and be like, okay, well, this is what I have, and I'm going to go after this, they do very well, really. But Don Callis doesn't really have any goals. He's just there to be there. So I do think there has to be a point where you kind of look at all these wrestlers and all these groups and be like, okay, what does this group want? What does that group want? What do they want to accomplish? And make them go after that, not just kind of feature them just to feature them. Great examples they Acclaimed, really. Like when they first started, they were a bunch of like wannabe rappers, and then they wanted to go after the tag team titles, and they had like so many matches on Rampage and Dark and everything, and then they got it. So I think they need to kind of put a lot of these factions under like, they need to go after an insurmountable goal and then accomplish it, or they're heels, they accomplish it quickly. So I do think that the Don Callis family and really the Don Callis role, it is getting a little bit old. The next match is Julia Hart versus Abaddon, and it was really funny because a lot of people were saying like, this is spooky, and both of them have a really good look and stuff like that, like for like horror wrestlers. And then again, like, I think my camera had an issue. I was going to take some pictures of Julia Hart once it came down with all the fire and stuff like that. Like, I think they do their entrances really, really strong. The only issue with this match is really that I do think that the problem is that this was a House Rules match. And they they never said that to the audience where biting was legal. And then it's also a stupid stipulation because, first of all, how many times have you seen MJF actually bite people? Like, they should have easily done something where this should have been like a hardcore match, and they should have done something like, okay, since you guys are having a hardcore match, we're going to book you earlier in the card. Like, maybe we're going to switch you with Swerve Strickland, and we're gonna switch you with like Miro or whatever. Really, like I think that they should have just had a hardcore match. And like I've said before, like you kind of like you did the same thing you did with like I forgot her name. I forgot her name. Like Abaddon had a hardcore match last month at Mohegan Sun, um, with another wrestler. That was like that with another wrestler. So I'm Hikaru Shida. Like should have kind of done the exact same thing really. Like maybe like like a Christmas Massacre match. That they should have done something like that. Really, I think that would have been better. But just to say biting's legal when you have MJF actually bite people a lot of his matches, whatever, that's kind of stupid. So I think they just kind of ran out of ideas. And I also understand the other thing too is that you're having a hardcore match, a no disqualification match with Edge and Christian, so you can't kind of do too many of them. But I would say that if you did like a 12-minute, if they a 12-minute hardcore match between both of them, and you had that earlier in the card, that would have been what you need to do really. And that, not just like say, oh, well, biting's legal when they always do that. For example, if I said I want to have a tables match with MJF, that makes no sense because he always does table spots like in almost every fucking match he has really. So I did think that was a little stupid that they had biting legal. And then also, I don't remember them announcing that to the audience. So maybe at home you heard that, but they didn't kind of like have a referee get out and say that. I don't remember any of that crap, and that's not good. When you have a stipulation or when you have a wrestler saying, okay, well, this is going to be the rules we play by, you have to make that clear to the audience. And that would have been better storytelling. And then also, too, if they're going to bite each other, I would have wanted to see blood or whatever, but they didn't really do that. So it was definitely poor execution, but I liked how the audience was really into like them being kind of spooky characters. There's a lot more that they can kind of do. But obviously, when you have a character like Abaddon with the makeup, and then she kind of looks like a cosplay Beetlejuice, you have to kind of maybe like you're like, okay, well, she has a very flashy look, so we need to kind of have matches where that are kind of flashy, no disqualification, or maybe like, as I said, like a Christmas Massacre match. They should have had that and maybe open the show with that or something like that, So it was definitely one of those things too where they could have just talked about different ideas and then do something like say, okay, we'll write down 10 ideas, or even use ChatGPT, write down 10 ideas, and then actually So the next match was Christian Cage versus Adam Copeland, and this was like a really big motherfucker of a match. Like a lot of people were just losing their shit or losing their minds in this match, and definitely I was one of those, and there was a lot of really great spots. And I also know that obviously these two have had like beefs and feuds and other things like that, and I would kind of say that it's a little bit controversial because obviously it was good that the Wayne family was there because since they interfered and made like an issue when Edge and Christian had their match before, that was it was important to have them. But I did kind of think that it would have been a better match if we just had Edge and Christian, and you just had like Edge and Christian and not them involved really, or you had something like where they didn't like have a match before then. It definitely took away, but I'm actually happy I didn't watch their match on television for that exact same reason. Like I kind of like that this is the first time I actually seen them like actually fight each other. So there was a lot of really great spots. So they had like they had something like where they went into the crowd and then they did like a thing where Edge jumped off something and then they went back down. They used they used like ladders, and they also like used a bunch of chairs and other things like that. So there was kind of like a tease of a TLC. So they should kind of do like a TLC match with them, or one day you can kind of do like a TLC match. Like when Sting retires, you kind of have like maybe Darby Allin and another person, and then Darby Allin and Edge versus Christian Cage and Luchasaurus and Nick Wayne, and then they find like another person for their faction. I do think that that's actually what they should kind of do really to really just and then have like a TLC match, like a 3-way TLC match. I think that would kind of be that would be like the way to go really with that. But I do, because like definitely this is kind of like a match that I think that they can do bigger and better, or more of a hardcore type of match. I do think that they should do like maybe 2 more hardcore matches and then just kind of wrap it up really. There other thing that I would kind of would say was like very intense. The crowd was going crazy. I was like popping. I was losing my shit. It was like the best match on the card, really. And I also kind of think that like they did their characters very very well. And there was some like controversy too that obviously the flaming table spot. Nick Wayne totally botched it, and it's like what I said. This is one of the reasons why I think that if you do another like match with them, you can do the table spot again and actually make sure it works this time or choreograph it more. There's more that you can really do another like table spot like that, and that would be good really. And also too, like I also appreciate that this match as well because they did enough, but they didn't do too much. Because as I said, like if this was kind of like John Moxley versus Edge, they would kind of be cutting each other. They'd be like and other things like that. So I appreciate them not doing too much, doing enough really. And then also too, like obviously they're a little bit older, so you don't want to do stuff like like them kind of doing pile drivers off of ladders or other like just really reckless shit. I think that you need to do enough, but not. You need to just do enough. You don't need to kind of go for the Evel Knievel shit. The other thing that I would say is that like once again, I do think that like obviously even though they had like the FTW match, even if they had like Abaddon versus Julia Hart in the beginning of the card where it is kind of like a hardcore match, and this one kind of a little bit later in the show, I think that would have been kind of good. But I also kind of like how when you had the FTW match, there was some hardcore stuff, but it wasn't. It was way different than this match, so it was kind of like a contrast. This was a little bit. This was way more intense. But if you did more intense shit with Wheeler Yuta and Hook, then this match wouldn't have stood out. And I also kind of appreciate them having a gap in time, really, because if they had this match after each other, like 2 matches like ahead, then it wouldn't have been that popular. Definitely the big controversy of the whole match was really the ending because Edge becomes the TNT champion, and then what happens is Luchasaurus comes down and he wants to cash in his opportunity. Christian takes it, manipulates him, and then he takes it, and then he becomes the TNT champion again. And there's a couple of things that I would say is that number one, that obviously I do think that if this is what they were going to do, like I've said before, Luchasaurus should have easily dominated and put in a lot of hard work and overcame a lot in the 20-man Royal match, just to be like, okay, well, I'm doing all this and this is the end result. That would have told a better story. The next thing that I kind of would say is that they've never done this before, where actually when you win a tournament, you actually can do it whenever. Usually what they do is they'll say, okay, well, on Dynamite, you're going to have this opportunity. But this is the first time they kind of treat it like a Money in the Bank type of thing. So it definitely breaks some physics. But I also kind of think that, honestly, it feels very like WWE and very Vince Russo to do all that, and then you have like Edge win it, and then it actually goes back to Christian. And I'm okay with that in a certain sense because like they've never done anything like this before. So sometimes you need to kind of do something that people are not going to expect really. But I think that by doing this, you kind of do a couple of things. You kind of make Edge at least one. He at least won one title in AEW. That's good really. And then also too, you kind of understand that this is what Christian Cage is about. He's about kind of being a Weasley prick. And that's what Weasley pricks do. They'll find whatever opportunity to get it. And then this also like pisses off the audience because it's like, we did all, you went through all of that and now he gets the title at the very, very end, really. So I do think that, it's definitely a controversial ending. But I really think that what they should have done is build up the Luchasaurus dominating earlier on to make it kind of like, okay, well, Luchasaurus may turn heel because he's actually being taken advantage of. The next match was Eddie Kingston versus Jon Moxley. And I would kind of say that it was really unfortunate because I fell asleep during this match. And the issue with Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley is that I don't like Eddie Kingston matches. He moves very, very slowly. So it does kind of feel like slow grappling and whatever. So I just got tired. I fell asleep. But I know that there's some people who enjoyed this match. And like I've said, that I feel a little I feel a little mixed about Eddie Kingston actually win the Continental Classic. Because like I've said, that it's like you had 12 people, you had all this tournament, you did all this time, and it goes back to the same person. And and that does kind of feel a little like, oh, you did all of this and nothing kind of progressed real. Like I've said, if Swerve Strickland won it, or if you did something like Brody King or somebody else actually kind of win it, then actually I think that would have been more impactful than it just going back to Eddie Kingston. And as I said, I do think that the other issue is that it's a very political match. That obviously Wrestle Kingdom's coming up, so they definitely want Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson back in the Tokyo Dome. So if you did something like have Swerve or Brody King or somebody else, really, it would have kind of said that, okay, it doesn't feel like, okay, one of the New Japan boys are actually, one of the people that New Japan likes is actually going to win this. So it did feel a little bit like, you know what, oh, well, it's predictable. So I do hope that, I think next year they have another wrestler win it. That's probably not done anything in New Japan, really, because usually if you win this title, they'll probably have you defend it in New Japan. So I did kind of not like that, but I do think that both of them are very slow and methodical, and obviously it's predictable. Eddie Kingston's a hometown boy; he's going to win. So that's how I felt, and I'm sorry that I fell asleep during the match, but like as I said, like the problem with Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley is it's very like slow and methodical, so it doesn't like attract attention. And then the last match was Samoa Joe versus Adam versus MJF. And there's a couple of things that I want to say about this match that, once again, I really appreciate this match because one thing that I liked is that they didn't do table spots, and it didn't really, and I think like with MJF, if I remember, he hit him with like the brass ring and he tried to choke out like Samoa Joe with like a rope or whatever, but MJF was doing more of the cheating and whatever. Like Samoa Joe, he gave him a muscle buster on the ring apron. So I did kind of think that there was a lot less of Samoa Joe trying to cheat. And then I do kind of think that sometimes what I liked about this match is that there wasn't a lot of cheating. There wasn't table spots. There wasn't like pile drivers onto concrete or whatever. Because sometimes, as I said, with MJF matches, they do that a little too much. So you need something different. But I did think that what I would kind of say is if you had the match that they had at Grand Slam on this card, like that performance, and then you kind of switch the Grand Slam performance, no, the match on this card, and you put it on Grand Slam, but you obviously made MJF the winner in Grand Slam, and you made Samoa Joe the winner here. I think that would have been a better match. So this kind of comes down to one of the issues we kind of see with AEW is that sometimes when you do repeat matches, that's not always good because the Grand Slam match was a lot better. And then the other thing that I would say even is that it should have been a steel cage match or something like that. I think that would have been best because obviously, with MJF and the Devil's minions all being in a cage, that's gonna be more terrifying if he's stuck in the cage and he can't get out and there's like 5 people whipping his ass, or if they wanted to do something like have the Devil and not only the one MJF and Samoa Joe to be beaten down by 5 people in the cage, that's more intimidating. But if you're going to do like a match, especially a heavyweight championship match, you always need to have a different stipulation. You can't kind of do MJF and Samoa Joe, no stipulation. MJF versus Samoa Joe, no stipulation. And then the other thing that I liked about this match was there's no like beatdown by MJF. Like during the start of the show, because I think like with him and Jay White, there should have been no beatdown or whatever really, and then then Jay White loses to the one-legged man really. So I'm kind of happy that they both had the match. I was actually kind of surprised that Samoa Joe won, but it's what I wanted. I didn't think he was going to win because, as I said, they usually book baby faces to win, and it honestly adds more questions. Is MJF going to be around in 2024? Is he going to go to WWE? Is he going to go to Hollywood? Definitely the MJF stuff has gotten to a point of being a little too repetitive. And even like when you saw the promo of MJF, he was doing like a political campaign where he's saying "our scumbag," and then they interviewed a woman that had sex with him and other people as well. So it does kind of get to a point of MJF comedy. I mean, and it feels very Flanderized because he's kind of done the same type of raunchy douchebag comedy. And he can't, and as I said, if you do that every single time, it becomes a gag. It becomes like you might as well say, well, MJF may as well grab the microphone and says, like, I'm MJF, I'm better than you, and you know it, and here's Conway Twitty or whatever. It gets to a point where it becomes really a trope, and I do think that I'm happy that we have some difference. So that's what I gotta say. Really, Samoa Joe, I think that deserves to be champion. Like I said, there's gonna be like new matchups, like Samoa Joe versus Strickland, Samoa Joe versus maybe Eddie Kingston, Samoa Joe versus Bryan Danielson. So I think that and he's also a champion that I feel can do a lot in the ring. Really, like Samoa Joe versus Wardlow or Adam Cole. I do think that it's going to get to the point where there's a lot more fresher matchups. Like MJF really needed to stop, and then a lot of MJF matches are the same because, like I said, like he does like the kangaroo kick. He does a lot of like popping the crowd, and it was actually funny what happened to the crowd. There was this woman that had Happy New Year's written on her chest, and she kind of was wearing a shirt that exposed like a lot of her breasts, really. And there was something in Wembley where or Full Gear 2022 where MJF motorboated one of the fans. So a lot of people thought that maybe that woman was a plant. So what they're probably going to do is actually have this woman like appear, and then MJF motorboats her. And again, that's controversial because obviously there's people that will say that's very sexist, and there's some people who say, oh well, that's if she wants that to happen to her body, go for her, girl power. So I do kind of think that I do kind of feel that I'm a little happy that MJF lost because also, like as I said, with a lot of his matches, there's a lot of comedy and hijinks, so he kind of needs to get away from that. And also, he also has the same type of super long matches and whatever. You need to kind of even have somebody who does a different style, like because MJF is comedy and long matches and near falls and whatever really. So we need kind of like a little bit. There's MJF fatigue, but this match was good because I do think that a lot of it happened. It was very very quick. It didn't feel like they were relying on pile drivers on concrete or table spots or whatever. So I kind of appreciate that it was a little bit more different. They didn't really need to do all that stuff. They need to kind of just have their match and that be that really. But it did feel a little anticlimactic. But obviously, Samoa Joe winning and it being in Long Island, MJF's home city, an anticlimactic match kind of works because like nobody kind of expected him to win, and then also when he won, there wasn't like a big like build up, So that was kind of important. And then the last thing was that it's revealed that it was revealed that Adam Cole, and I believe the Undisputed Era and Wardlow are all part of the Devil's factions, really. So, like I've said in other videos, that it is a little controversial because obviously Wardlow's in another faction. Why would he want to be a lackey? And like I've said, that they really need to do something where Adam Cole is still recovering from injury, so it makes a lot more sense for him to actually have Wardlow versus Samoa Joe, and that's where Wardlow becomes the champion. And then you do Wardlow versus Adam Cole. Like that would be the way to do it. But I do think that another big issue that I do see is that definitely nobody. In my opinion, I don't know who the Undisputed Era is because I don't watch NXT. So it does kind of feel like you really don't know who these people are. Really, I think a great example is that I'm not sure how to say this. I think honestly, you don't want like a bunch of debuting wrestlers to actually be part of the faction because sometimes people don't know who they are. So that's just not that's not kind of good and stuff like that. You need to have like people that people already know about, So that's also very important. Like I think a great example would be there's a bunch of people in MLW that are friends with MJF really. So if they all kind of like were part of MJF's faction, that wouldn't be good really. If MJF had like a rival faction, that wouldn't be good because it's like, who the hell are these people? You need to kind of have people that you already know of. Like honestly, if MJF wants to come back, it should be MJF, the Acclaimed, and they should also have another powerhouse wrestler. It should be Samoa Joe. If Samoa Joe gets betrayed by Adam Cole, or they can kind of look on the card and find another like big beefy guy, like maybe Brian Cage or Swerve Strickland or something like that. Like Swerve Strickland's not like a big hardcore wrestler, but you get my point. Like somebody that's kind of there, but can be a rival to Wardlow. And I think the best person would be Brian Cage, and then kind of be like, okay, well, he's paying Swerve and Nana, and then he's like, okay, well, we're gonna borrow Brian Cage and we're gonna pay you for it. And they're like, nah, you're like we like the extra money, the extra bitches. That's how they should do it. Or they should bring in another like big beefy hardcore wrestler, big muscular guy to kind of rival them. Or like if you want to bring Ryback into the company, that would be a good Ryback role, you know. But but yeah, I kind of felt that was that. And then as I said before, I do think that with Adam Cole actually winning and being the devil and all that stuff, I do think that was the right call because it's playing it safe, really. As I said, if you did somebody different, like if you did like Max Caster or Jungle Boy or somebody else, it would have felt a little too. It would have kind of felt a little too like, you know what? Okay, well. Like like it would have felt a little too out of the blue, really. And I think the other thing too that a lot of people can kind of argue is that you never saw the devil take off his mask. So even though it's Adam Cole, maybe he is subordinate for an even bigger threat. You know, that could be kind of interesting if you want to say, okay, well, he's actually not the devil because he never took off a mask. So therefore, maybe it's Britt Baker who's the actual devil, or it could be another person. But there's a lot of different things that they can kind of do with this, and I'm definitely really interested in the direction. I think the worst thing that could possibly happen is as MJF just says, I'm not going to be there in 2024. So this is almost like a way to write him off, and then he goes off into the sunset. Because I do think that him having a feud, you have a lot of things that you can do the next year. So I hope that he doesn't. So I hope that he's with AEW until 2025, really. And that this was just a way to kind of like be like, this is how I want to end my chapter with AEW. It does feel kind of sad and anticlimactic. There's a lot more that he can do, and also I don't like his Bidding War 2024 thing where he was talking about like how great it is to use this to launch into Hollywood or WWE, really. So I kind of like worry like what they're gonna do with this, because as I said, it does feel a little bit like aces and eights. But I do think that if MJF can kind of create a big feud and they have big matches for the next year, and he was involved and they have like feuds, rivalries, and back and forth, I think that they have something really great. And if they don't have it, then you kind of have a aces and eights types of faction. And then I also kind of like this dynamic where Adam Cole is not the champion, but he's probably going to be champion one day because they can kind of look at MJF and see like how he was kind of backstabbed. So maybe Adam Cole's kind of like, I want to be the giver and the taker, because you kind of look at somebody like MJF who always just manipulated and took from people. So I do kind of think that it's interesting to see Adam Cole as a champion, but he's also kind of a little bit. He's less. He's more. He should come off as self-righteous, and also doing good things and bad things, versus MJF who kind of facaded himself as a good person. So it was a very interesting. It was a very good pay-per-view. It went by really, really quickly. I also appreciate that it didn't feel like they're trying to cram too many matches, and I also kind of felt that. Overall, it was a really great viewing experience. Nassau Coliseum was probably one of the most cleanest coliseums one of the most cleanest venues I've ever been to. I really enjoyed myself, and even though I fell asleep during the match, I checked my phone a few times, but I didn't feel like I was kind of like waiting for things to end, really. So it was overall really good, and the only reason why I fell asleep is because I work night shift, so I was kind of up from like 10 p.m. Friday all the way until like 2 a.m. Sunday. So it's a lot on my body, really. So, it's understandable. But overall, it was a really great show. I really enjoyed it. And it's going to be really interesting to see what directions they do for next year. But I did think that they pulled the trigger on a couple of things. They just have to really take all the people who participate in the Continental Classic, make them a big deal for next year. They also need to look at people on the roster like, Hobbs, Dalton Castle, and Wheeler Yuta, and then actually do something with them. And then I also think that, another thing is that, hopefully there's a storyline with MJF in 2024. I do not want to see him go to WWE. I don't think that would be right for him. And then also, if this was his way to kind of write himself out of the company, I think that would be very anticlimactic. And it would also be very selfish of him. I think AEW still needs MJF a lot, really. And then there's so many stories that can be told. And if he's not around for that, it feels like he kind of undercut the company. So So yeah, very interesting pay per view. I'm very excited to go to the Prudential Center in a couple of days, and I'm excited to still be into AEW. But I do understand that this was a very polarizing pay per view. There's some people that really didn't like it, and there's some people who said that okay, well after the show, all the all like the energy got sucked out of the arena. But I do think it's a 50-50. I think, as I said, they need to do some creative changes. They also just need to wrap up the MJF and Adam Cole storyline. And then also, too, if MJF is wrestling injured or you don't know if he's going to be around next year, you have to give it to a new champion. And then, as I said with Samoa Joe, he really wants to be in AEW. He doesn't feel like he's saying, you know what, I want to be the next superhero, and I want to be the next superhero for Marvel, and then see you later, really. So I kind of appreciate that he can be a heel, but he can also act like, you know what, I want to be part of this company, not just like MJF's. Oh well, I'm edgy because I talk about Triple H or other things like that. So I will. It's a very interesting show, but it's definitely a show that I think that they're taking some risks about what they want to do for next year, and that's kind of like the big thing about AEW is that they need to be more of a risk taker and back their risks, and they definitely put things in motion to do that for 2024 through World's End.